My parents wanted me to pretend to be a family friend at their party because they were ashamed of my career. My revenge took 3 years but was worth every second. I was 31 years old when it happened, but it still remains in my head like a scene I can't erase. My name is Sarah, and those who knew me as a child would say I was a very observant girl. Not exactly shy, just cautious. I listened more than I spoke, absorbed more than I showed. That's probably why I noticed all the cracks before the house started to crumble. My parents, Margaret and Richard, were the type of people who loved to maintain perfect appearances. They lived for image. If something went wrong, they didn't fix it, they hid it. Painted over the damage, rearranged the furniture, smiled at the neighbors, and prayed that no one would ask too many questions. I spent most of my life pretending not to see the peeling paint. I grew up in a house where everything had to look impeccable. My mother was an interior designer, always dressed as if she were about to be photographed for a decorating magazine. My father was a corporate lawyer, the type who wore a tie even on Sundays. They had important friends, attended charity events, and made sure everyone knew the Hartleys were a successful family. The problem is I never fit into their version of success. I was a strange child. While my older sister, Victoria, got perfect grades and participated in all the right clubs, I spent hours in the basement drawing, painting, creating things with scrap I found. My mother hated that. She said I was wasting my potential, that art was a hobby, not a career. Sarah, dear, she used to say with that tense smile that didn't reach her eyes, you need to think about your future. Art doesn't pay the bills. My father was even more direct. You're going to end up waiting tables if you keep up with these fantasies. Still, I persisted. I went to art school, against their wishes. My mother cried the day I announced my decision, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of shame, as if I had thrown the entire family's reputation in the trash. What am I going to tell my friends? She asked, as if that were the biggest concern. Victoria, of course, followed the expected path. She graduated in business administration, married a plastic surgeon named Dr. Preston Walsh, and had 2 perfectly behaved children. She lived in a 3-story house overlooking the lake, drove a German SUV, and organized themed dinners every week. I, on the other hand, lived in a converted loft in the old part of town, drove an old van covered in paint splatters, and made a living creating art installations and custom murals. At 28, I had my own studio. It wasn't big, but it was mine. I had a small but loyal list of clients who appreciated my work. Local galleries began exhibiting my pieces. A regional art magazine did a feature on me, calling me an emerging voice in the contemporary art scene. I was proud. I thought that maybe finally, my parents could see that I had made the right choice. But no, they never said it openly, but I could see it in the way my mother described my work to her friends, as if it were a cute hobby. Sarah is doing her little art things. Keeps her busy. As if I were painting by numbers instead of building a career. My father almost never asked about my work. When he did, they were superficial, empty questions. Still painting, he would say, as if he were asking about the weather. I stopped trying to impress them after a while. I thought it was just one of those things. You grow up, your parents stop understanding you. It happens to everyone, right? But then came their anniversary. They were celebrating 35 years of marriage and wanted to celebrate like never before. Rent a private event hall, have a full gala, buffet dinner, live music, everything. My mother sent me an invitation by mail, even though we talked on the phone a few times a month. It was formal sealed, the kind of thing you'd expect from a wedding. In fact, I laughed when I opened it. They even included an RSVP card with a stamped envelope, as if I were just another guest. Still, I filled out the form, checked the attendance box, and sent it back the next day. It didn't matter much. I figured it would just be another fancy event, and I was prepared to play the game. Dress well, show up, smile, shake hands, pose for photos. That was the role, right? The presentable daughter. I even offered to make a personalized gift for them. A large canvas, hand-painted, representing their house in different seasons. It took me over 40 hours to get the details right. I planned to give it to them that night, thinking it could be a rare moment of connection. The party was scheduled for a Saturday. On the Thursday before, I got a call from my mother. It wasn't unusual. She always liked to give final instructions before big events. She said she wanted to discuss some small details before the party. I assumed she was referring to the schedule, seating, or something trivial. So I agreed to stop by their house after work. That's when things started to fall apart. I arrived around 6. My father was in his office, and my mother took me to the living room as if we were going to have a normal conversation. But then she looked down the hall, lowered her voice, and said, "We wanted to talk to you about something delicate." She said "we," but it was just her talking at first. My father eventually joined us, leaning against the fireplace, as if trying not to get involved. But he knew he would have to support her eventually. My mother composed herself as if she were on stage. Then she looked into my eyes and said, "Sarah, we were thinking it would be better if, at the party, you didn't tell anyone you're our daughter." I blinked as if I had heard wrong. "What?" She gave a tense smile. "Just for the night. It's complicated. And we really don't want to have to explain your situation right now." My situation. That was the word that hit me hardest. As if I were a problem. A scheduling conflict that needed to be avoided. Something ugly that needed to be edited and removed from the scene. I looked at my father, hoping he would intervene, say she was overreacting. But he said nothing. He just sighed and said, "It's easier this way, Sarah. Many of our friends from the city will be there. They have certain expectations." Expectations? I repeated, my voice coming out thinner than I intended. "What does that mean?" My mother touched my arm as if offering comfort, but it felt more like a bribe attempt. "It's just one night. Just say you're a family friend. Or one of the vendors. No one will question it." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. "You want me to lie about being your daughter so your friends don't have to know what? That I didn't go to Yale? That I paint for a living?" They didn't answer. My father looked away. My mother's mouth trembled as if she were about to cry. As if she were the victim. And in that moment, something inside me just shut off. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the painting on the floor. I didn't run. I just stood up, went to the door, and said, "You don't need to worry about me at your party." My mother called after me, her voice shaking, "Sarah, don't be dramatic." But I was already leaving. I got in my car, drove home, and put the painting in the back of my closet, where it remains to this day. They tried calling a few times after that. Left voicemails that were equal parts pleading and guilt. I didn't answer. I didn't go to Christmas that year. Not to Easter. Not to my father's birthday. Eventually, the calls stopped. But the messages didn't. They just circulated through other people. My aunt, my cousin, even an old neighbor who ran into my mother at the market, asking me why I was never around. They said I was being cruel. My aunt told me one day, over coffee, "You cut them off for no reason at all." For no reason at all. I didn't correct her. Just smiled, said I had a lot of work at the studio. But lately, they've started reaching out again. 3 years have passed. 3 whole years of silence. And now, suddenly, they want to talk. Clear things up. Don't understand why I'm still holding a grudge. What they don't realize is that I'm not angry anymore. Not the way they think. I'm planning something. And it's going to be quiet. Precise. Just like everything I create. I didn't block their numbers immediately. For a while after the party incident, I just let the calls go to voicemail. I'd look at the screen, seeing the name Mom or Dad light up like ghosts I hadn't properly buried. My finger hovering over the screen, frozen. Sometimes I'd listen to the messages. Most of them were short. "Sarah, call us back. Sarah, this has gone on long enough." The worst ones were those where my mother cried. She always cried strategically. Never at funerals. Never at actual family arguments. But yes, on voicemail. That was her stage. The first time I heard her say, "I just don't understand why you're being so cold," I almost threw my phone across the room. Not because of what she said, but because of how convincingly hurt she sounded. It was almost impressive. The performance. If I hadn't been in that room that night, I might have believed her. But I was there. I remember the temperature of the room, the chandelier light reflecting on the fireplace marble. I remember how they couldn't even say the words "our daughter" without choking, as if they were dirty, as if they weren't convenient. And I remember what came after. At first, I thought they would leave me alone. And maybe deep down, they understood they had crossed a line. But that was naive of me. My parents didn't apologize. They reframed, rewrote the script, and handed it to the rest of the cast as if nothing had happened. The rewrite started slowly. I got messages from my aunt saying things like, "I heard you couldn't make it to the party. Your mother was so sad you had to cancel at the last minute." I didn't respond. Then came the guilt-laden updates. "Your father was really hoping to see you at Easter brunch. He kept looking at the door as if you were going to walk in." As if I were ignoring them without any explanation. Things got worse from there. About 6 weeks after the party, I stopped at my favorite coffee shop on a Sunday morning. I just wanted a coffee and maybe a croissant. Nothing dramatic. But the barista Claire, someone I had chatted with dozens of times before, friendly and casual, looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Hey, I met your mother the other day." I stopped halfway to getting my wallet. "Really?" She came in with some friends from the club. "I mentioned that you did that custom mural in our backspace." She hesitated. And she she laughed. Said something like, "Oh, Sarah was always good with her hands. She just never figured out how to turn it into a real career." I froze. I felt the heat rising up my neck, slow and warm. Claire looked uncomfortable. I thought it was strange. I thought she'd be, I don't know, proud. I managed to laugh. "Yeah, you'd think so." I grabbed my coffee and left without savoring it for long. That night, I sat in my studio long after closing time, sanding the same piece of cedar until my fingers hurt. I wasn't even working on a project. I just needed to do something with my hands so I wouldn't punch a wall. They were ashamed of me. Fine. I could live with that. But ridiculing me and diminishing what I had built in front of strangers in my own community, that was completely different. I told myself I would cut them off completely after that. No more calls, no more messages. I blocked their numbers. Stopped following them on social media. Deleted the last family photo from my camera roll. Even packed up the old family albums I had kept, throwing them in a box in storage. Out of sight, out of mind. But, of course, they didn't stop. They just changed tactics. It all started with Victoria. Victoria and I were never particularly close. She was the golden child. The one who got perfect grades. The Ivy League one. She married at 25 to a plastic surgeon with a jaw that could cut glass. She lived in a penthouse in the city, posted professional family portraits as if it were a competitive sport, and organized gender reveal teas with full buffets. The last time we talked, she asked if I had ever considered specializing in something a bit more scalable. She called me out of the blue one morning. "Sarah," she said, as if we were in the middle of a conversation. "Can we talk?" I almost hung up. "What do you want?" "Mom is crying," she said immediately. "She doesn't understand why you're ignoring her. She asked me to pretend I wasn't her daughter, Victoria. At their anniversary party. Do you realize how insane that is?" There was a pause. "She didn't mean it that way." I laughed bitterly. How did she mean it then? She just didn't want to have to answer questions. You know how their friends can be. They don't understand people who follow unconventional paths. "That's not my problem." She said, "You've always been sensitive." My jaw tensed. "Right. I'm the problem." "Sarah." She sighed, as if talking to a spoiled child. "You're punishing them." "Why?" "It's not because of your side job." "It's not a side job," I said firmly. "It's a business. A successful business. I have employees. I pay taxes. I have recurring clients. I build things, Victoria." "Sarah," she interrupted. "That's great. Really. But they come from a different generation. You can't expect them to understand everything." And there was the dismissal. The condescension. As if my life were a cute detour from the real world. As if I were the eccentric aunt who shows up on Thanksgiving with strange gifts and stories no one listens to. I ended the call without saying goodbye. After that, I avoided all family gatherings. If someone in the family had a baby, I'd send a card. Gift by mail. But I wouldn't show up. Not because I was bitter, but because I couldn't stand the idea of sitting in front of people who saw me as a joke in their refined lives. After all, my silence made them talk louder. They started commenting that I was depressed, that I was going through a rough patch, that I was looking for direction in life. My mother even told a friend that I had been fired and was trying to get back on my feet. It was as if they couldn't conceive of a version of me that was fine without their approval. If I missed their events, if I didn't play the good daughter, then I must be struggling, failing, lost. But I wasn't. I was better than ever. My business was thriving. I hired a second full-time assistant and started working with clients from other states. An interior design magazine featured one of my installations. I wasn't just surviving. I was building. But none of that mattered to them because it wasn't their version of success. Then came the last straw. I received a letter in the mail. Not a call, not an email. A real letter on thick cardstock, written by hand in my mother's cursive handwriting. I almost didn't open it. Didn't want to open it. Inside, there was an invitation to Victoria's vow renewal. She and Dr. Glassjaw were having a big renewal ceremony to celebrate their 10 years of marriage. Destination. Full weekend itinerary. Optional formal attire. And at the bottom, in delicate gold letters, there was a phrase that made my stomach turn. Please respect the couple's wishes. Adults only event. No children. Relatives who work in catering should contact staff upon arrival. Catering? I read it 3 times before even blinking. There was no mistake. It was on purpose. I wasn't being invited as a sister. I was being invited as support staff. I turned the card over. Inside the envelope, there was a small note. Sarah, Victoria would love it if you contributed some decorative pieces. Something rustic and elegant, in your style. She said it would mean a lot. Let us know what you need in terms of materials or delivery. There were no apologies. No acknowledgement. Just the assumption that I would be so desperate to be included, even in a minor role, that I would jump at the opportunity. That's when something changed in me. Before I was hurt. Disappointed. Maybe even ashamed. But now I was done. And for the first time in years, I felt calm. I had no intention of building anything for that wedding. But I would give them something. Something they couldn't ignore. Something they would never expect. But to achieve that, I would have to play the long game. And wait for the perfect moment to begin. The invitation to the vow renewal sat on my work desk for days. There, covered in sawdust, stained with paint, without any ceremony. Every time I looked at it, I felt a strange mixture of disbelief and clarity. It was as if someone had turned on the lights in a room where I'd been sleeping my whole life. It's funny what happens when the last thread breaks. For a long time, I walked that cliched tightrope. Trying to be a better person. Trying to prove myself without making too much noise about it. Trying to find a version of myself that my parents could accept. Not love. Just accept. But the moment I read that invitation, I realized something brutal. I could win a design award. Open 10 studios. Make $1 million from a single installation. And they would still introduce me as someone who works with her hands. Because they needed me to be less. They needed a contrast to seem brighter by comparison. So I set the matter aside. Canceled everything for a week. Not publicly, not dramatically. Just told my clients I needed a little time to work on a personal project. Then I locked the studio door and turned off my phone. Went off the grid in my own little world. And fell apart. The kind of breakdown that doesn't look dramatic to anyone on the outside, but feels like an earthquake inside. I stopped sleeping. Ate junk. Got stuck in these cycles of memories. My mother discarding a small painting I did in 4th grade. Well, dear, you know you're better at math, aren't you? Trying to hug my father after winning a local art competition at 16, and he patted me on the shoulder as if I were a stranger who had spilled something on his shirt. There were so many small cuts. I just ignored them for years. Convinced myself they were no big deal. But now I was bleeding all at once. One night I found myself sitting in my van in the parking lot in front of the studio. Just sitting. I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to go anywhere. I remember holding the steering wheel and thinking maybe I could drive until the tank ran out. Just go. Disappear. But I didn't. Instead, I went back inside, locked the door behind me and sat on the studio floor for what felt like hours. No music, no phone. Just me, the smell of paint and the sound of my own breathing. I wish I could say there was a flash of light where I suddenly got up and knew what I had to do. But it wasn't like that. It was slower, softer. More like a tide rising around my ankles before I even noticed. It all started with a canvas. A large blank canvas that had been leaning against the wall for months, waiting for the right project. I put my hand on it and felt a small spark in my chest. An ember under the ashes. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. Not for a client. Not for Instagram. Not for anyone else. Just for me. I worked all night. No plan, no sketches. Just movement. I painted, scraped, through paint. Mixed colors that shouldn't work together but did. I let the piece become what it wanted to be. Something abstract. Something raw. When the sun rose, I had a canvas that didn't look like anything I had done before. It wasn't symmetrical, it wasn't practical, but it meant something. It felt like me. I looked at it for a long time and realized something. I wasn't broken. I was just trying to fit into the wrong frame. That was the beginning. The following weeks were quiet, but something inside me had changed. I started waking up earlier, eating real breakfast, not just reheated gas station coffee. I went to the studio and told my assistants I would be away from client work for a while. I needed space to do something different. They understood. I went back to basics. Spent hours studying old techniques, things I hadn't revisited since my early college days. Got books, watched old videos, played with materials I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't about perfection. It was about rediscovery. And I created a rule. Every day, I had to make something that would never be sold. A small watercolor. A clay sculpture. A charcoal drawing. Something that existed just because it existed. It was like therapy. I didn't tell anyone about this phase. Not my friends, not the other artists I occasionally collaborated with. It was too personal. Too sacred. But every time I finished something, I felt like I was putting a broken piece of myself back in place. And slowly, the noise from my family started to fade. Of course, I still heard about them. My cousin tagged me in a family photo at my niece's baptism, an event I hadn't been invited to. My mother posted a long, dramatic message about estrangement and prayers. She tried to be vague about me, though she hadn't used my name. My aunt left a voicemail saying, "Just so you know, your father had to explain to everyone why you weren't at the renewal." And it was humiliating. I didn't respond. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking their approval. I was grieving it. There's a difference. And when I let go of the hope that they would see me as I really was, something incredible happened. I started to see myself more clearly. I started to dare more in my work. More risk-taking. One day, I posted a photo of an installation I had done, a series of hand-painted glass panels that looked more like sculptures than traditional art, and it went viral. A week later, I got a call from a gallery in Portland asking if I'd be open to exhibiting some of my more experimental pieces. I said yes. Then came the interview. A podcast for young artists asked me to talk about my journey, how I built a business without traditional business training, what it was like working alone, what were my biggest obstacles. I thought about saying no, but then I realized I wanted to say it out loud. I wanted to tell my story. I told my story. Not the simplified version I used to tell at dinners. The real one. I talked about growing up in a house where creativity meant lack of direction, where love was conditional on success, and success was defined by someone else's blueprint. I talked about how hard it was to undo those voices in your head. Stop comparing yourself to people who never really saw you. The episode had thousands of downloads. I started getting messages from other artists, other black sheep, people who felt invisible in their own families. They told me my story made them feel seen, and that meant more to me than any award. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. I wasn't healed. Not completely. There were still moments. Passing a father and daughter in the art supply store, hearing a song that reminded me of family vacations, that made something turn in my chest. But I wasn't drowning anymore. I had found solid ground. And that's when the email arrived. It was from Victoria's event planner. A bright and animated message, full of bullet points and exclamation marks. She wanted to follow up on the expectations of the custom pieces I had agreed to provide for the vow renewal reception. I stared at the screen, stunned. They had decided for me. Probably to look generous. Probably to feel less like villains. The email included photos of the space, notes about the color scheme, and even a suggested timeline for installation. We've reserved a lovely table for you near the service entrance. The message said. You'll have a clear view of the decorative arch you helped create. Service entrance. I didn't respond immediately. I closed the laptop, went for a walk. And that night, I sat in my apartment, drinking tea and looking at my walls. At the shelves I built. At the lamp I designed. At the pieces that told my story better than words ever could. And I smiled. Because now I knew exactly what to do. And I had the perfect piece for it. But first, I needed to visit someone. And I needed to bring a box with me. Not the kind you'd expect, but the kind you don't forget. I didn't rush. That was the first part of the plan. Not rushing. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to them. I was creating something. And I knew better than anyone that anything worth building takes time. Revenge, like art, is all about precision. After I received that email from the event planner, cheerful, fake, friendly, completely oblivious, I knew they had no idea what was coming. They really thought I would show up like a trained dog, or be suffocated and quiet, or walk away, letting them control the narrative again. They didn't know the version of me that had emerged from those long silent weeks in the studio. They didn't know what I had learned, and they had no idea what I was capable of. To start, I called Naomi, a former client who had a boutique event space downtown. She once hired me to design a series of minimalist wood installations for her space, and we'd been friends since. She was very detail-oriented and was in the know about everything happening in the city's luxury event circuit. It was obvious that if anyone knew more about Victoria's event, it would be her. She answered on the second ring. Sarah. Wow, it's been a while since I've heard from you. Is everything okay? Better than ever, I said. Actually, I wanted your opinion on something. Do you have a minute? Sure. What's up? The Emily Carter event. The 10-year vow renewal. Do you know anything about it? Naomi let out a groan. That circus? Yeah, unfortunately. She booked the Anders estate and demanded everything custom. My assistant spent 3 hours just showing floor options that she didn't even end up using. Just out of curiosity, I said, pacing slowly through the studio, you wouldn't happen to have a layout of the venue? Would you? Sarah, Naomi said, changing her tone. You're not thinking of taking on that nightmare, are you? Not officially, I said, smiling. But let's say I'm preparing something. I'd love to see how the space is organized. Especially the back entrance, the service rooms, the storage areas. Naomi laughed. The kind of laugh that says, I don't know what you're planning, but I want to see it happen. Give me 10 minutes. I'll email you the blueprints and the vendor list. Naomi, I said before hanging up. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, she said. But whatever you're planning, make it count. I had my map. Now I needed a team. I didn't want to involve anyone close to my family. Too risky. Too many chances of information leaking. Instead, I reached out to people who knew me. People who had been in the trenches with me during the early days of the studio. I found Marcus, my first assistant. A former high school art teacher who became an installer with incredible attention to detail. Then I called Liv, a freelance photographer and stage designer I had collaborated with on some gallery installations. She was chaotic in the best way possible. Creative, bold, and excellent at setting things up the right way to provoke reactions. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet. I invited them to come to the studio on a Friday night and spread a large cloth over the main workbench. Underneath it were 3 sketches and a series of labeled mock-ups, a multimedia installation, a pedestal, and a hidden compartment with a sliding mechanism, all built from scratch. This is it, I said, lifting the cloth. It's going to the vow renewal. Liv raised an eyebrow. Your sister's event? Marcus crossed his arms. I thought you weren't going. I'm not, I said. But this is. I watched their eyes examine the drawings. The confusion slowly transforming into understanding. Is this what I think it is? Liv asked, pointing to the carved center. I nodded. You want to display this at the event? Marcus said, a bit impressed, a bit horrified. No, I said. I want them to ask for it. That was the key. This couldn't look like sabotage. It couldn't be sabotage. It had to be something they would accept, something they'd be proud of, something they'd pose for photos with. Completely oblivious to the trap beneath their feet. It had to be a gift. And not just any gift. A masterpiece. I started working. The installation took almost 3 weeks. I worked in secret after hours under a tarp, even inside the studio. It was made of molded glass, clear resin, and polished steel, in an asymmetrical modern shape that looked abstract from afar. Clean, elegant, sophisticated. But up close, you could see the truth. Embedded in the resin, almost invisible unless you looked carefully, were photographs. Small black and white prints. Some innocent, me as a child holding a paintbrush. My parents smiling at a party. Others, sharper. Screenshots of text conversations. Emails. Excerpts of transcribed voicemails. She didn't mean it that way. It's just a hobby. Don't tell anyone you're our daughter. I didn't quote anyone directly, but I didn't need to. Each word was engraved with surgical precision. You had to search. You had to get close. The deeper you looked, the more uncomfortable it became. But on the surface, it looked stunning. Elegant. Refined. Museum quality. I even built a minimalist pedestal to match, brushed black steel with a simple plaque saying, Legacy. Commissioned for the Carter family. 2025. I even sealed everything in a box with a branded label, listing my studio as creator, along with a fake backstory about how Victoria had personally requested the piece months in advance, and how it represented heritage, growth, and transformation of raw material into art. I knew exactly who to send it to. The event planner. I wrote a short, confident email saying I was fulfilling the family's request and delivering a centerpiece as a highlight. No charge, of course. A gesture of celebration. I attached elegant photos. Keywords. Descriptions that made it sound expensive. I sent it with a note saying it would arrive the night before the event and would require minimal setup. She responded in 20 minutes. This is beautiful. Prime spot reserved near the welcome table. Just like that. It was done. I spent the next 2 weeks finalizing the mechanism. You see, the real trick wasn't the installation. It was what was inside the pedestal. A small drawer perfectly hidden, locked in place with a magnetic switch. Inside, a hardcover photo album. Leather cover. Custom made. Elegant. And on each page, a different snapshot of what my family didn't want to be seen. Photos of my father shaking hands with people he later badmouthed. Screenshots of social media comments my mother left on anonymous forums complaining about her underperforming daughter. My invitations to public art installations they never attended, but told people they supported. Even the invoice where they quietly refunded a donation I made in their name because it didn't match their professional image. I included a copy of that party invitation. The one where they asked me to act as if I weren't their daughter. I decorated it as if it were art. And on the last page, a handwritten note. This is who I am. This is who you are. You taught me that image is worth more than truth. But I chose something different. I chose honesty. Let's see how you feel. After closing the drawer and repositioning the magnet, I sent the installation. The event would be in 5 days. I wasn't going. I didn't plan to show my face. That would have confused everything. No, I didn't want this to unfold suddenly, like watching an ink stain spread. But I sent someone. Liv went in with a camera hidden in a brooch. Said she was helping the florist. Got a pass and walked in as if she belonged there. Even wore one of the family colors. Blue. Silver. She called me 30 minutes after the reception started. They loved it, she whispered. The installation is front and center. Your mother gave a speech about how it symbolizes strength and family legacy. I almost choked. She's telling people you made it for them months ago. That it's a representation of how far they've come as a family. Marcus, sitting next to me in the studio, burst out laughing. I shook my head stunned. The irony was so thick you could spread it with a spatula. And the drawer? I asked. Still sealed, she said. But there's a kid crawling near the base, banging on it like it's a drum. I give it 20 minutes. I hung up and waited. And somewhere, deep inside me, I felt a click. So revenge? Not yet. but alignment. The pieces were in place. And the real show hadn't even started. The first message I received was from Liv. It arrived about 3 hours after the scheduled reception time. Just one line. "What you did is masterful." No context, no follow-up. Just those 4 words. I didn't respond. A few minutes later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, another. Then another. And then silence. For about an hour, I listened to that silence. It wasn't confusion. It was coordination. They were regrouping. Liv sent the footage that night. Nothing public, of course. Just a private folder on Dropbox labeled Legacy. It had everything I needed. The moment the installation was brought in. The moment the photographer asked them to pose with it. My mother's fake smile. My father's carefully measured smile. Victoria giving a whispered explanation to guests about how it represented our family's core values. Strength, elegance, tradition. And then, in the next moment, a child. 6 or 7 years old, bored and restless. She sidles up first, tapping lightly. Then, harder. Liv managed to capture it all. You see the child hit a specific spot repeatedly. Then she crouches down, touching something. The guest crouches down with her. "Honey, what did you find?" She runs her hand over the seam, looks up curious and calls someone. A few moments later, one of the event staff approaches. The magnetic lock slides. The drawer opens. That's when the video went silent. You could feel the air change. A woman leans in. She picks up the album and opens it to the first page. Her smile slowly fades. Then she turns. And turns again. Her face tells the story. On the 5th page, she looks around and runs to my sister. Victoria, radiant in a light blue dress, takes the book with a polite, confused smile. Still posing for photos. Still floating in her little cloud of self-importance. She reads the first page. And everything stops. Her expression crumbles. Not dramatically. Not instantly. Just soft. Slowly. Like a dying flower. She turns to another page. Then another. On page 6, she runs off camera, holding the book against her chest like a bomb. You don't see where she goes. But the whispers begin. That's the thing about events like this. They're performances. And performances depend on control. Lighting. Mood. Stage control. You control the story. But the moment the audience feels something real, something raw, everything unravels. Within minutes, you can see the guests start to murmur. Turn. Point to the installation. A woman looks more closely and visibly recoils. A man leans in and starts tracing one of the embedded phrases with his finger, eyebrows raised. Then someone takes a photo. A few more follow. Phones light up. People start reading aloud. The phrase, "She didn't mean it that way," echoes faintly through the video. And then, like a wave, you see them realizing that this wasn't a tribute. It was a confession. And they had displayed it. Framed it. Bragged about it. I didn't need to be there. I could feel the room closing in on itself through the screen. Liv did one last pan through the reception hall before leaving. My mother is standing, near the food counter, talking rapidly to 2 elderly women with horrified expressions. My father is standing rigidly near the installation, looking at it as if it had betrayed him. Someone tries to cover the pedestal with a tablecloth, but it's too late. The photos have been taken. The story is already leaving the room. And Victoria? She was gone. I watched the footage twice, then turned it off. They had served their purpose. The reaction was swift and deliciously silent. That's what I expected. No screaming, no tearful apologies. Just consequences. The next day, my parents called me. I didn't answer. They tried the landline. Burner numbers. Victoria's number. Nothing. Then came the email. Subject: "We need to talk." The body of the message was short. "Sarah, what you did last night was cruel and humiliating. You embarrassed this family in front of hundreds of people. What did you want to prove? You succeeded, but at what cost? Contact us to discuss next steps. Your mother hasn't stopped crying." I stared at the screen for a while. Then I typed 2 words. Message received. And clicked send. That was it. No explanations. No arguments. No emotional monologues. They didn't deserve my voice anymore. 2 days later, my mother posted a carefully crafted statement on her social media. Sometimes, even those we love can act offensively. Families are complicated. We ask for privacy and understanding during this time. She disabled comments, but the screenshots made it to me. Some of her friends sent me messages. One said, "I never imagined you had gone through all that. I'm sorry." Another said, "The piece was hauntingly beautiful. I don't think I'll ever forget it." That meant more than any forced apology. Victoria never reached out. But I heard she canceled the honeymoon that was supposed to be the following week, standing up all the friends who were at the event. That her husband, Dr. Glassjaw, was furious for not having examined the piece more closely. Apparently, his company also took some hits. Some clients weren't happy to associate with a family that publicly disowned their daughter and got caught lying about it. Couldn't have happened to nicer people. Meanwhile, my business exploded. I got 5 new commission orders in 1 week. Most people saw photos of the installation online and wanted something with similar emotional depth. A design magazine published an article titled, "The Artist Who Exposed Her Family in a Sculpture." I didn't ask for the title, but I didn't argue either. I was invited to give a TEDx talk. I declined. I got a major offer from a gallery in New York. I accepted. My waiting list grew to 6 months. But none of that was the real victory. The real victory came on a Tuesday afternoon, about 3 weeks after the event. I was in my studio working on a new piece, something soft and warm, in the shape of a slow breath, when someone knocked on the door. Not at the main entrance, but at the side one. The private one. I washed my hands, opened the door, and there was my neighbor's daughter. The one who always rode her bike past my studio on the way to school. She was holding a school project. A cardboard jewelry box, badly glued, badly painted. She looked nervous. "Hi," she said. "My mom said you make beautiful things." "I'd do my best," I said, crouching down. She hesitated. "This came out kind of crooked. Do you think you could help me fix it? I want to give it to my grandmother." I looked at the box. One fold was crooked. The lid didn't fit well. But the effort was there. The intention was there. I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I think we can fix it." And as I held that little broken box in my hands, I realized something. Sometimes the best thing you can build is the version of yourself that no one ever thought you could be. Even if that means breaking everything that came before. The weeks turned into months. The vow renewal installation became urban legend in the city's art and social circles. People talked about it in whispers. "Did you hear about that artist too?" I never confirmed. Never denied. Just kept working. But something had fundamentally changed in me. It wasn't just that I had gotten revenge. It was that I had freed myself. For the first time in my life, I wasn't building for anyone's approval. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone but myself. Marcus and Liv became more than collaborators. They became family. The kind of family you choose. The kind that really sees you. We expanded the studio. I hired 3 new assistants. I started giving workshops for young artists who came from families that didn't understand their choices. Your family doesn't need to understand you for you to be valid, I would tell them. You just need to understand yourself. And I'd see their faces light up. See the weight lifting from their shoulders. The same way it lifted from mine. 6 months after the event, I received a letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother. My first instinct was to throw it away without opening it, but something made me stop. I opened it. "Dear Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to understand why we did what we did, but I need you to know I've been thinking a lot about that night. The installation you created. It was beautiful. Painful, but beautiful. Your father and I spent our whole lives believing that controlling the narrative was the same as controlling reality. That if we looked good, we'd be good. That if we hid the imperfections, they wouldn't exist. But you showed us the truth. And the truth is that we failed you. Not just that night, but on many nights before it. You built a beautiful life. And we did everything in our power to make you feel small for it. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking you to know that I saw the installation. Really this time. And I saw you in it. And I'm ashamed. With love and regret. Mom. I held the letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Part of me wanted to believe. But the truth is it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need their regret to move forward. I had already moved forward. I put the letter in a drawer. Maybe one day I'd respond. Maybe not. But in that moment, I had work to do. 1 year after the vow renewal, the gallery in New York opened my first solo exhibition. It was called Legacy Redefined. There were 23 pieces, each one telling a different story about family, identity, and what it means to free yourself from expectations that were never yours to begin with. The original installation, the one from Victoria's event, was at the center. But this time the drawer was open. The album was on display. And next to it, there was a new piece. A mirror. Simple. Unframed. Just a plain mirror. And underneath it, a plaque said, "This is who you choose to be when you stop trying to be who others need you to be." The opening was packed. Art critics came. Collectors came. Other artists came. But the people who mattered most were those who came and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The ones who cried. The ones who took photos not of the art, but of themselves reflected in it. Because they understood. And as for my family, my mother showed up at the opening. I didn't warn her I was coming. I didn't invite her. But there she was, standing in the back of the gallery, wearing a discreet coat, without the usual flashy jewelry. Without her usual armor. She looked at the entire exhibition in silence. Stopped in front of each piece. Read each plaque. When she got to the original installation, she stood there for almost 20 minutes. I watched her from afar. Saw her shoulders tremble. Saw her cover her mouth with her hand. And when she finally turned to leave, our eyes met. She didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just nodded. Once. And left. I don't know what that meant. Maybe an apology. Maybe just acknowledgement. Maybe nothing. But I felt something loosen in my chest. Something I'd been holding without realizing it. Victoria never reached out. I heard she and her husband moved to another city. A fresh start, I suppose. My father sent a text 6 months later. It just said, "Saw the exhibition online. You were always talented." I'm sorry I never said that. I didn't respond. But I saved the message. Because even though I didn't need their validation anymore, it was nice to know that, finally, they had seen. Today, 3 years after that anniversary party, I have 2 studios. One here, one in Portland. My waiting list is 1 year. But the work I'm most proud of isn't what I sell. It's what I give away. I started a mentorship program for young artists from families that don't support their choices. It's called Wrong Frame. We give scholarships, free studio space, connections. But most importantly, we give something no one gave me when I needed it. We give validation. We say, "You're not crazy. Your dream isn't small. And you don't need anyone's permission to be who you are." And every time I see one of those young artists sell their first piece, or get their first exhibition, or simply look at their own work with pride instead of shame, every time I remember that night. The night my parents asked me to pretend I wasn't their daughter. And I realized that night didn't break me. It freed me. Because it forced me to make a choice I had been putting off my whole life. The choice to stop trying to fit into the wrong frame. And build my own. A few months ago, I received a package in the mail. No sender. Just a return address I recognized. My parents' house. Inside, there was something wrapped in tissue paper. When I opened it, I found something I hadn't seen in years. The small painting I did in 4th grade. The one my mother had discarded. It was framed now. Professionally. Beautifully. And on the back, a note in my father's handwriting. Found this in the attic. It was always beautiful. I just didn't know how to see it. I hung it on my studio wall. Not because I needed their approval, but because it was a reminder. A reminder that some people take a lifetime to see, and some never see. But that doesn't change who you are. You were always enough. You just needed the right frame. Yesterday, a young woman came to the studio. She had red eyes from crying, trembling hands. My parents said that if I don't quit art and go back to medical school, they're going to disown me, she said. I recognized that look. That panic. That feeling of being forced to choose between who you are and who they need you to be. I held her hands, looked into her eyes. You can do two things, I said softly. You can spend your whole life trying to fit into their frame. Or you can build your own. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You'll feel alone sometimes. I paused. But in the end, you'll look at yourself in the mirror and recognize the person looking back. And that's worth everything. She started crying again. But this time, they were different tears. Tears of relief. Of recognition. How did you do it? She asked. How did you survive? I smiled. I stopped surviving, I said, and started creating. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. And my parents once asked me not to tell anyone I was their daughter. But here's the truth, it took me years to learn. They don't define who I am. They never did. I do. And I built something beautiful. Not despite them, but despite the frame they tried to force me into. I built my own. And it's perfect. Not because it's flawless, but because it's mine. And no one can take that away from me. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of overcoming injustice. Your comments and support make all the difference for other people who may be going through similar situations. Until the next story.